Welcome to Reimagining Work and Life Through Crisis. This is the Leader Insights series, and today I am thrilled to be joined by one of the most visionary leaders we have had the pleasure to work with, and one of my very favorite people, Elizabeth Moore. Hi, Liz.
Hello.
All right, so I told her she has to just sit there for a little bit while I tell you all how awesome she is.
Yes.
So here we go. Until her retirement at the end of last year, Elizabeth D. Moore was the Senior Vice President and General Counsel of Consolidated Edison. I call it Con Ed, that's why it trips me up, of Con Ed, one of the nation's largest investor-owned energy companies with approximately $13 billion in annual revenue and $47 billion in assets. Ms. Moore, or Liz, advised the company's chairman and chief executive officer as a member of the company's corporate leadership team. She was responsible for the day-to-day operation of the approximately 80 attorney and 200 employee legal department, including the litigation, regulatory services, corporate secretary, and business ethics and compliance groups. This is my favorite part of her bio because this is what she is, a rock star. She is, okay. In her role, Ms. Moore created a high-performing, flexible work culture, enabling the recruitment and development of the next generation of diverse leaders. The law department modernized its technology platform, driving greater productivity and efficiency and increasing support for the company's compliance and enterprise risk programs. Recognizing the need to provide targeted support for strategic business initiatives, she embedded attorneys into working groups for these projects. And we're going to talk about that today, but I am so, I love the fact that you just feel so proud of the work you did that you put it in your bio. And it's just, I want to share that today with everybody. But I will have to also continue by saying, prior to joining Con Ed in May of 2009, Ms. Moore was a partner at Nixon Peabody and served in the administration of the former New York Governor Mario Cuomo for 12 years, culminating as the counsel to the governor from 1991 to 1994. And I have to just add, she is a devoted wife, mother, and grandmother. You may hear her adorable granddaughter at some point who may pop in. She is absolutely adorable. And she also loves to golf and drive. And just again, welcome, Liz. It is so great that you are here.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you, Callie.
Now that I have sung your praises, we are going to hopefully inspire some of your peers. You and I have talked about this. Liz is just a very visionary leader who 4 years ago saw that her organization needed to transform. She and her legal department voluntarily undertook the work of shifting to high performance flexibility. And she has a story to tell that I think could inspire many leaders who find themselves right now at a sort of fork in the road, a choice point. 3 months ago, many leaders were just thrown into this change. And now you are grappling with which direction you're going to go. Are you going to try to go back to the way things were, which is not going to be that easy? Or do you take this opportunity to move forward and really rethink how, when, and where work can be done in your organization? So today I asked Liz if she would just share some of her experiences leading that change in order to provide some insight and inspiration. She has very generously offered, we're not going to take a ton of time today because I know everybody's busy and I want to do some highlights with her, but she has very generously offered, if there's a senior leader who is watching this and would like to connect and just learn, talk one-on-one, please connect with her on LinkedIn. Her LinkedIn bio link is on our website, and we will also share it. So again, thank you, Liz.
Yes.
So let's get started. Now, one of the things that I think really grounded the culture shift process that you undertook was that you had a very clear strategic imperative you called the tsunami that drove your commitment to make this change. Can you talk about that multifaceted strategic imperative, what that was all about?
Well, there were a couple of, when I joined Con Edison in 2009, the law department had been doing terrific work the same way for many, many years. And I had three things that I noticed right away. One was I had the most retirement eligible group of folks. These were very, very talented, experienced lawyers. Regulatory law is very complex. These folks knew it cold, but I knew that they weren't going to be around that much longer since they were retirement eligible. So I had to figure out, how am I going to recruit the next generation of regulatory lawyers and still have the knowledge transfer, so that the experienced folks who were there would have the opportunity to transfer what they knew to the folks that we were going to bring in. The second thing I noticed was that the company invests heavily in technology. The company invests in reliability. Con Ed is the utility for New York City. So technology, when it comes to reliability, when it comes to customer interface, very, very high priorities. But the law department, for a lot of different reasons, including the fact of people who had been there a very, very long time doing the work exactly the same way for that period of time, had not invested in technology. We had a library. It was full of books, even though everything that you might need was online. And people would hold on to those books. Just keeping those books updated cost a lot of money. So I recognized that was a challenge as well. And then during Superstorm Sandy, for a few days, our building, it was very, very difficult to get to work. The building was almost inaccessible. And we realized very quickly that it was very, very difficult for us to do work during that period of time. So paper-driven, and it was really a challenge. So recognizing that I was going to have to recruit really terrific people, couldn't necessarily compete in the marketplace with the Apples and the Googles and the Facebooks. Recognizing that I had to deal with knowledge transfer, realizing that we were spending a lot of money on paper books, paper legal pads, and then the fact that we really could not work remotely should there be another issue. And this pandemic is certainly that kind of situation where you really do have to have the ability to work flexibly. So those were the factors that really made me start to think about how best to transition to that flexible work. And it really I wasn't really looking for flexible work. I was looking for an answer to those challenges.
Yes.
I didn't know what the answer was.
Yep. And then wasn't there also around the same time, we had this conversation once where you talked about, they came to you about redesigning the workspace, and this is why I just love you, because you're always thinking like that far ahead. And you said yourself, okay, so how are people going to work 20 years from now, right? Like, let's redesign this workspace, not around how they're going to work 5 years from now, but really looking forward. So what element did that play in all of it as well?
Well, again, because I knew we were going to be recruiting the next generation, and the likelihood was those folks would come from places that had state-of-the-art technology. Certainly that's what I would be looking for. And so we had to design the space to be able to use the technology that we saw coming. Again, hard to predict 5-10 years out what kind of technology you would need, but certainly having workspaces where you could have larger monitors, for example, where perhaps people would not necessarily want to stay in one desk, one place, one office, where people might want to move around, because with wearable technology, you can put on a pair of headphones, carry your phone, you can go anywhere. And the other thing I recognized was that, Con Edison, as I said, provides power to gas, electric, and steam to all of New York City. Many of our clients were not in that building. Mm-hmm. So was there really a need for everybody in the law department to be in the building? And frankly, most of the time they were not in their offices, which was good. They were engaging with clients, they were working, side by side. So do we really need to have law offices if people aren't actually going to be in them? And can we create technology to make it possible for them to be less in them? Litigators were in court all day. So, do they really need an office? Can we give them better technology so that they don't have to carry those gigantic briefcases that, weigh 500 pounds everywhere they go? And, certainly we could give them a laptop, a tablet, lots of different kinds of portable technology but then that meant training, that meant making sure that we were able to get the paper into the technology and it was accessible and that people knew how to use it.
Yeah. And what I love is you saw the intersection of those three things. You saw the intersection of the technology, the workspace, and then the work flexibility, that infrastructure of flexible work. You saw it. But then you also saw that it wasn't just going to be about the infrastructure, that you really had to challenge the culture and the culture had to
Absolutely.
change. And so that's where, again, I think, and it started with you. So what were some of the
Yes, Callie, you know
yes,
that.
yes, it did. So what were some of the changes you had to make as a leader in order to move this process forward?
Well, I am a classic baby boomer. I grew up as, I guess, what you would call an old school lawyer, legal pad, writing everything else on a legal pad, looking at books. So many of the traits that a lot of other people in the law department, especially leaders in the law department, I had. And the notion that you show up for work at 8 o'clock and you don't leave the office until 6 p.m. and if you don't do that, then you're not working. That was my culture, and it was certainly the culture of other leaders in the department. So it really took a lot of work to understand that you could be productive. In fact, you could be more productive if we gave you the technology that would allow you to access materials faster. You could be more productive if you weren't commuting 2 hours a day or more. And most of the folks in New York do commute. I even commuted an hour and a half each way. So if you didn't have to do that commute, you could be more productive, and you could work when you were able to work, as opposed to having to be at a particular place at a particular time from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening.
Yep. And I know there was a cultural norm that people had to check in and check out, like log in and log out when they were coming in and leaving.
Yes,
and
yes.
you got rid of that too. I mean,
there were several iterations of the process. So, when we first started contemplating working remotely, it was, we will have set dates. We'll have a policy.
right.
So people could sort of sign up for a particular date, and then that date they would work remotely. And we had a lot of folks say it was unfair because they couldn't work remotely. A litigator has to go to court. An investigator has to go into the field and be available to go into the field. So there was a lot of people saying, well, this isn't fair. Only certain people can do that. And that's when, thanks to your help, it really became sort of understandable that, it wasn't going to be fair. Some jobs you can't do flexibly. So what we then did with your help was we assessed what the jobs were and who could do what. And each team looked at the work that they did and the work that they do, and determined how they could do it, whether they could do it flexibly, how they could do it flexibly, did they have the technology, the home offices or the setups to be able to work flexibly, and then it really started to flow.
And that, again, was that marriage between the infrastructure and the culture. And everybody, it's a process, right? And I loved, one of the things that I just admire you so much for is, you probably don't even remember this, there's one meeting where you stood up and you just looked at me and you go, oh, and the administrators have to be able to do this. And you just and that was just like, you were committed that this really had to be something where they also could be thoughtful about how, when, and where they could work. And that was
we really put it on them. We really put it on everybody to say, can we work flexibly? And if so, how can we work flexibly? And what kinds of technology do we need to do that? What kinds of management do we need to do that? And people had to learn different skills to be able to make that happen.
So let's talk about some of these key implementation points. And I know one of the things you often talk about is, what was critical is everybody started to think about, what is performance? What are we measuring? Can you talk a little bit about that?
No, we were, as I mentioned, we were measuring time in the office, time looking at a screen. I mean, nobody knows what people are doing when they're looking at screens. The good news was work was happening. So, the one thing we did know was that the law department was doing the job it was supposed to be doing. But when you start to empower people to figure out how to work and you give them tools like new technology, and you give them training, and you give them flexibility so that if they want to get home and help their child do their homework, before starting work when they put their child to bed, I mean, that makes for a much more happy person. That makes, and frankly, a much more productive person. So we really, we realized fairly quickly, and I think the feedback that we kept getting from the teams that were working on this was so positive. And and there were some what you called guardrails, some guardrails, for example, you had to have your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Your phone had to be on. I had to be able to reach you if I needed you. Simple rule. But it was an absolutely necessary one. So there were some guardrails around us, and each team had their own guardrails as to how they wanted to interact. Some teams said that, that at least once a week they wanted all to be there in the office, and that wasn't something I told them they had to do. I think the whole department decided that when I had meetings, that they would be there physically. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't necessarily the person who wanted that, but frankly, we never did quite get to the point where we could do virtual conferences the way we're doing now. So this iteration of technology, whether it's Zoom or any of the other conference type processes, has really opened this up. And I think, as I understand it, talking to folks in the law department now, they are not going back into the building for a while.
Yeah.
It's working.
So one of the things I always appreciated about you is you were always very honest about when you were uncomfortable with something, like something.
Yes.
And one of the things that I think you
didn't call it whining.
No, it was just an honest sharing, which was very helpful, and I think set the tone for everybody. Your senior leadership team, I think that set the tone, that they felt like they could really honestly talk about where they were struggling a little bit in terms of, but then what I loved was once they started talking about how they were struggling, it quickly would go into problem solving. Like there would,
yes.
Right? So one of the things that you talked about is you legitimately every now and then would come out of your office and you'd look around, and like it's a Friday and you'd be like, okay, or like a day before a holiday, and you'd have a reaction to that. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, again, being your traditional sort of baby boomer type person, I would walk out of my office and there would be nobody or very, very few people on the floor, and I would be like, whoa, this is terrible. What's going on? Are people working? And, again, when we looked at productivity, when we looked at the work that was being produced, did it really matter to me that somebody didn't work on a Friday, but decided to work all day Sunday because it was raining on Sunday? No, obviously, again, being able to access people when I needed them was critical. But when I thought about it, yeah, if it's a beautiful sunny Friday and a ugly Sunday, why not switch out? And those kinds of choices people could make. If somebody wanted to, work out from, I think, 7 o'clock in the morning and come in a little bit later, if they wanted to come in at all. So those kinds of things, but it really did require, and one of the things that you and I've talked about quite a bit is the secret sort of sauce in all of this was managers had to manage.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's probably the hardest part, because you really do have to manage work. The good news is when you do it, peers, talk to each other and work out how to share work and how to make sure that something that has to be covered gets covered. But it does bring people together. It does require collaboration. But the end result is, I think everybody knows, when you have people who are happy in their jobs and have the opportunities to do, take care of their life as well. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And I think I've mentioned to you that when we did start recruiting that next generation of attorneys, and by the way, and this is not young, it wasn't simply young people, it was the gamut, people who were very, very senior attorneys, because I needed people who could come into the role and start working right away, more junior attorneys, but almost to a person, women and men would see the ability to work flexibly as a huge benefit. It was always talked about. And I was able to recruit folks from, places where I would never have thought I would be able to get them, with skills that I thought I would never be able to get. And one of the biggest recruitment tools that we had was that people just couldn't believe it when I say, well, you can work whatever you want. You and your team figure it out.
Yep. And I think beyond, in addition to the recruitment and the productivity, there were so many interesting examples of the department being innovative in the way you were all working that I loved. And the story of the two people who figured out how to allow the attorneys to sign documents electronically versus having to come in, and they figured all that out themselves, right?
Yep.
And that was talk a little bit about what you saw in terms of people being creative about how they were doing their jobs and how they were coordinating with each other.
Well, setting up, each team set up calendars so people knew what they were doing, when they were doing it. Litigators, as I mentioned, those big briefcases now became a tablet, which meant that if somebody could not cover a particular case, that could easily be transferred to somebody. Or if somebody was in Brooklyn and a case call came up, another person could very easily handle that because they had everything they needed in that tablet. So, this was not, I wouldn't call this cutting edge. I'm sure that there's lots of law departments and lots of companies that had this, but for us, it was really a very, very different way to operate. We had a mailroom that would get, I can't even tell you how many pieces of mail. And, we did something simple. We got some scanners, we scanned all the mail in. We're not, it's all available. Now, again, lots of companies do that, but this was all part of the same process. So it wasn't simply, and flexibility, I guess, was kind of a little bit of the incentive to have people learn how to use new technology, to learn different kinds of ways to work. If you did that, you were able to work flexibly. But it was also absolutely critical in terms of the law department's operation. And it also freed people up. I think I've mentioned to you that we started to embed lawyers on business teams early. And in part because we realized that when things got too far down the road and the lawyers came in and we said, well, you can't do that, it's very frustrating for the business folks. It's very, the operations, very frustrating to have that stop then. But if you have a particular project, a large project, and you have an attorney or attorneys there from the very, very beginning, working with you and also brainstorming with you. Some of these things weren't simply lawyer questions. They were just, what do you think kinds of issues. Very exciting for the lead law department team to be part of that, and very prideful. And when there were team recognition events, it was terrific to see not just engineers and operators and folks like that, but there would often be a lawyer being recognized for their work on those teams as well. And again, technology also made that happen, and flexibility made that happen too, because it wasn't simply flexibility to take care of your personal life, it also gave you flexibility to go out in the field and be with those business folks or be with the operations people when they were doing a significant project. And for people who, for the legal staff, legal lawyers, legal staff to put on their hard hats and their steel-toed boots and get out there, it would, many of them, it was very, very cool.
And it's interesting we talked about the training that everybody got, because everybody got the same training. Like everybody from you all the way down, every level, were trained in the same way to approach all this, to think it through, to collaborate with each other. And it was interesting to see the lawyers start to be intentional about, okay, so now this day of the week, I'm going to be in this office that I support. And this is what I'm going to do. There was a lot of intentionality that went around thinking about how, when, and where they were going to work. And I want to just talk for a minute about some of the real hard data outcomes. So we did, the way the change worked in your department is everybody was trained, and then there was this 6-week pilot, and we did
Right.
a post at 6 weeks. And, you know, it was pretty interesting. We asked employees and we asked managers what they thought the impact on productivity had been. And at the end of that 6 weeks, employees said 51% of the employees of the legal department said they thought it had increased. 33 said it had stayed the same, and there was no sense, 1% said decrease. And then supervisors, 40% said they thought it increased, 48% said they thought it stayed the same, and only 3% thought it decreased. So there was a perceived pretty rapid increase in terms of how people felt they were being productive. And talk to me a little bit about why you think that was. What do you think happened from that experience?
Well, there's two things, I think, two big things. One is the technology made people more productive. Once people learned it, and it was, I think there was a period of time when it was not more productive because people were being trained, and there was a lot of, many people had never used a laptop or a tablet, or knew how to, we had people who didn't know how to type. So I think there was a period of time when that training was occurring, when people were getting very, concerned, and probably productivity was lessened. I think, but once we got past that, the technology certainly helped. The second thing I think that happened, as I mentioned, is the flexibility to not have to spend 2 hours a day commuting. I mean, just think about that. Getting back 2 hours 2 hours or more of your day, not to mention not getting on a subway and a bus and a ferry and on a cold winter day or on a hot summer day, that takes a lot out of you. I did that. I mean, I took the train and the subway to work, and it takes a lot out of you when you have that kind of commute. So just knowing that I don't have to get on, I don't have to catch that train, I don't have to get on that subway. I think I have time to do something else. I have time, I can do two more hours of work. Mm-hmm. I think that also made people really, really comfortable with it. And and for the managers, I think there was a fear that people would take advantage of it, that they wouldn't really produce, that it was going to be harder because they're going to have to track people down and make sure that they're getting the work done. But I do think the incentive of being able to work flexibly made people really responsible about getting work done.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that you and I have talked about is this fear on the part, and I think this is where a lot of leaders are right now, this sense that if they go 100% remote, that, people won't want to come back into the office ever. And what I think you found, and you can talk a little, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this, was people did want to come into the office. There wasn't this whole exodus where everybody, talk a little bit about that. What ended up happening?
No, I think, again, I can't speak for, national organizations that have people in multiple states. Most of the folks that work at Con Edison are located in the New York metropolitan area. But I do think a couple of things. One is people enjoy the collegiality of talking to their peers. So they did want to see and these are friends, these are colleagues, these are people who could help them problem solve, these are clients. So they didn't want to be gone for all that time. And as good as virtual meetings and virtual conferences are, there's still a human need, I think, to be face to face with somebody, to have lunch with somebody. So I think that was one of the things. The second thing, and again, I was in the office a lot. I did work remotely a fair amount, but I was in the office a lot. Again, I'm a baby boomer, so kind of being in the office makes me feel good. And there are a fair number of people who are in the building, clients as well as leaders and other attorneys. And I think people, I always said to people, FaceTime is good, because I walk around the building and I walk around the office, and I'll stop in somebody's office and say, so how's it going with that project or whatever. And if you're not there, I will call you if I need you, but it's kind of nice to be able to sort of walk into somebody's office and sit down and say, how is it going? So people, I think, really enjoyed the human interaction, the physical human interaction. And I think I saw most people at least once a week.
Yep. And I think that's important as we go to this next phase with the pandemic. And I think, again, leaders grappling with, do we get rid of all of our workspace because we don't need it anymore? And, I think as the things evolve, I think ultimately what's going to happen is they're going to end up with this hybrid remote
Yes.
on-site. And I'm curious if you agree with that.
I absolutely agree with that. And again, it's very different from, the headquarters is in New York, but, people are in California. I think and they're going to stay in California. I think that's I did not deal with that kind of challenge. And I think that's a little more difficult. I think it's doable, but I do think that you're right. We will move, and especially as this virtual conference technology gets better and better. I think if I had the opportunity to get better virtual conference technology, we probably would have been way farther along in that area than we were. I mean, we still held most of our meetings on the telephone, and we're not seeing people, not visible. This helps a lot.
Yes. But it's interesting that you talk about the technology, because there was a lot of technology actually that was available to the department. It was that using it that had not happened. That was that lack of context, that people didn't really have a sense of, oh, how do I use this? And I do think, and I bet this is what organizations that were forced to rethink work over the last 3 months will find, is that when there is that context and people have to use it, then they do start really diving in and leveraging it way more than they had before.
Well, that certainly has happened in the law department at Con Edison. I mean, people are definitely doing virtual meetings more, and and that also helps you improve the technology. You can decide what really works best for your particular situation. So I think that was the next. There was only so much I could expect people to absorb in terms of new technology, and they absorbed a whole lot.
Yeah.
As I think when I said we are no longer going to have a library, I had sort of World War III on my hands.
I know.
But fortunately, we got rid of the books and we got rid of the supplements, and we saved over six figures every year. And it took some time, but people did it.
So talk about this, another cost savings, which was the space. Because when we were working together, part of the challenge was everybody was going to move to this temporary space where there were no offices at all while you built out your new space. And then your new space, when everybody went back into it, how much less space did you end up having to take up? And then you also made the comment that ultimately probably you thought the law department could ultimately operate even within less space than it did. So talk about the reduction in space and how that happened.
I think we went down in terms of use of offices. We went down about a third of the offices went away, and that was before we had moved. So those decisions had to be made because the floor was being renovated before we moved to our temporary space. The temporary space, there were almost no offices. Even everybody was in an open floor plan and more like cubicles than offices. And it took a little bit. It took some adjustment, but I think people really enjoyed it. And what I liked about it was people who would not necessarily interact. Environmental lawyers were talking to employment lawyers. Litigators were talking to regulatory attorneys, lawyers and staff. So the interaction of people getting to know each other and to befriend each other, and especially because we had hired a lot of new people. For them to come into an open floor plan where they could, if somebody saw that they needed something or they didn't understand something, they could immediately get that necessary information or feedback. It was really terrific. The department ultimately went back to the original floor with, I think, a third less offices. I think had we had that experience with the open floor plan before we made the decisions about what the new floor would look like, it might have been even more open than it is.
And now, everybody always says, it's great when you make a change like this, but what does it look like 18 months later, 2 years later? And we came in and we did do a check, and talk a little bit about what ultimately things look like in terms of, you talked about you were able to hire people. And I know, talking to your chief of staff, who was wonderful. He was saying that, and I'm curious if you agree with this. He said he felt like you were able to replace the people who retired with fewer people who were actually then able to do more work. So that to him was a definite productivity saver. And you
Yes,
hired
yes.
them at less money than what they were making in some cases when they came in from the big law firms. They took,
Yeah, yes.
because they valued the productivity. Is that true?
Yes, the flexibility was really a huge incentive in terms of ability to recruit. And yes, between the technology and between the, hold on a second, I think we have something going on upstairs. Can you hear?
It's so fun. We are all BBC Dad now. We are all BBC Dad. Do you know what that is? Yeah.
No.
No, there's this, anyway, I'll tell you.
Anyway, I think it's calmed down now.
It's fine.
I'm sorry. What was the?
The question was about what happened 18 months later. So you go into a change like this and you have visions of how you want it to play out. And then you had wanted the talent, and it turned out you did hire people, and you were able to hire fewer people to replace the people who retired. And those people were doing more work, were able to be more productive than before. And they often came in at less money because they valued flexibility.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that they were able to do more work. We reorganized the work.
Okay.
And because the folks who left were incredible people. I mean, the experience and the talent that they had was just remarkable, but they didn't have the tools.
Yeah.
So I think that the folks who came in, because they did have the tools, because they, in many cases, had used technology in their prior lives, they were able to adapt very, very quickly to this process. And it also meant that we had to figure out workflows. We did a lot of work around, how does this particular matter progress through the process, and who touches it? And can we reduce the number of touches? Can we, reduce the amount of paper that somebody has to file? So all of those things came out of the flexible work as well. And I think that's what led to, I would say, increased productivity. Doing that workflow analysis coupled with the technology and coupled with the training of the people to use the technology made a huge difference.
It goes back to ultimately what's flexibility. It's the question, right? What do you need to get done, and how, when, and where do you do it best?
Yeah.
And, that's really what it comes down to. And
yeah. And, the feedback we got about being able to go to the gym, being able to take care of a family member, whether a child or a parent, not feeling that tension of, oh, I got to get to work, but, I need to take her to the doctor. Or I want to see this, I want to go see my kid play softball. Those tensions of that I certainly had in my career, we lessened dramatically. People could choose those things and not worry about not having a job.
And then what we heard when we came back in that 18-month check were some pretty remarkable stories about people giving you even more because they had that. So your leadership team were telling stories about people who would there was, you're a 24/7 operation, things come up, and people were just right there responding when they needed to. They didn't, because they were given, they gave back. Would you say that was indeed what you saw as well?
Oh, absolutely. And it was, a real, and the company was changing as well. The company's culture was changing as well. So, the company was really looking at new and innovative ways to provide the services so coupling that with the law department looking at new and innovative ways to provide its services, it was really a great mesh. We had, we got really lovely and wonderful feedback from our clients. They really enjoyed the having early access to attorneys on particular projects. I think we worked with, just to give you one example, we worked with supply chain, which is another very workflow intensive process. And oftentimes, the lawyers would get blamed for not being able to process supply chain contracts, procurement contracts as quickly as they would like. So we really worked closely with that group and tried to really understand what did the law department need to touch, what didn't it need to touch, how can we get some parts of this taken care of earlier so that we're not slowing down materials going to the folks that needed them. So we very much looked at a lot of different client organizations and said, how can we provide better service to you, especially now that we have technology that allows us to talk to each other in a more efficient and productive way.
See, it's just amazing, all of the full circle innovation that happened. And, you know, people say to me, how do you keep doing this job for 25 years and still so passionate about it? Well, I say two things. One, I get to work with visionary, amazing leaders like you who truly just are committed to making change happen. And the second thing is to work with the people who report to you, and everybody who dives in and just makes it happen. It really is magic to watch. And we are so grateful that you allowed us to partner with you. It was just truly a pleasure.
It was thanks to you that we really thought about this in a very, very different way. I mean, we knew where we wanted to get to, but we were kind of stuck as to how to get there. And you came in and yes, you kind of blew me up every once in a while. I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. And you know that some of my leaders had the same reaction. You really think this is, you know, but you encouraged us, you supported the entire team. And you know, there were things that didn't work, and we said, okay, that doesn't work.
Yep.
But it really pushed people to think of ways that they could do their work in an innovative way, in a flexible way, in a way that made sure that we were doing the work that we needed to do in the best way we could. So wouldn't have happened without you, Callie.
Oh, well, hey, it's a partner. It's never one person. It's always a team. It's a synergy. So Liz, imagine you have a peer. I want you to imagine there's a peer of yours, maybe in a business, very traditional business like your business, that found themselves 3 months ago, all of a sudden, everybody they work with is remote or in some kind of a and B staggered shift situation where they have social distancing in the office. And now they've kind of sort of muddled through thinking, oh, we'll just be a couple more weeks and we can go back to the way things were. But now it's getting pretty clear that probably that's not going to happen, and they need to decide what they're going to do moving forward. What would you say to that leader who is hesitant to use this opportunity to truly step back and reimagine how, when, and where their people are working and shift the culture? What would you say to that person?
I mean, I think you can get bogged down, or you can see the opportunity. And the opportunity is going to be different for everybody. You know, what happens in a law department is going to be very different than what happens in a operations area. So the other thing I would say is engage your people. They have the answers.
Yep.
They know their work, and I learned more about other types of work than I would have had we not had those conversations with people. And you know, I had people come to me and say, if I had this technology, I could do this.
Mm-hmm.
So there are folks who have really terrific ideas, but may, for whatever reason, never have expressed them, or you know, just, I'm coming to work, I'm doing my job, I'm going home. And when we empowered those folks and we heard their voices, we got so many great ideas that really made a big difference in terms of how we perform. And this is craziness. This is really, really hard. You know, there are going to be things that people are going to try that aren't going to work. And that's the other thing I guess I would say is, not everything's going to work. Not everything's going to work well. So that's another reason why having your folks engaged, so that they know when something is going to work great, they will, you know, put their hearts into it, and they will understand that it's okay to fail. It's okay for it not to work.
Yep. And that was another wonderful thing you did. You definitely supported and encouraged all the great things that work. But if something didn't work, you'd like, hey, well, great. You know, let's try again. We'll try something else. So that's wonderful. So Liz Moore, again, you are a wonder. And I really hope that just some of the insights you shared today inspire leaders to see that, yes, this is an operational resilience strategy, flexibility, but it's also a powerful talent strategy. It's a powerful innovation strategy. It's a powerful
Productivity.
strategy. Yep, productivity. It's a powerful strategy to leverage your resources, your technology that you've invested in, the real estate that you have. And hopefully the leaders who are at this choice point will see that and, want to go forward in a new and innovative way. So thank you.
Thank you, Callie. Great talking to you as
Great.
always.
And as I said, Liz Moore is willing, if you are a leader, she is willing to chat with you. If you want to connect with her on LinkedIn, she's happy to share any insights that might help you as you think about what you want to do. So again, Liz, thanks for being so generous. Well, enjoy being with your granddaughter. Have fun. And thanks again, Liz. Take care. Bye-bye.